Welcome to my channel, Scary Stories Daily. I have some great stories to tell. Let's get started. I decided to put the ring up for sale on Craigslist, hoping to get at least $1,000 for it. Little did I know that this decision would plunge me into a nightmare beyond my wildest imagination. Life had its ups and downs, but it was a pretty sweet diamond ring that I hoped would bring in some much-needed cash for my family. Money was tight, and every extra dollar counted. It all began when I received a reply to my Craigslist ad. A young married couple expressed interest in the ring and wanted to see it in person before making a purchase. We exchanged a few messages, and they seemed like any other potential buyers. They appeared polite and eager to check out the ring, so I agreed to their request to meet at my house in Edgewood, Washington. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I prepared for their visit. My wife and our two sons, aged 10 and 14, were at home with me. I had no reason to suspect anything sinister. After all, it was just a simple jewelry sale, or so I thought. When the couple arrived at my doorstep, they looked like an ordinary young pair, nothing out of the ordinary. I greeted them and invited them inside to take a look at the diamond ring. The moment they stepped into our home, however, the atmosphere shifted. It was as if a dark cloud had descended, casting a shadow over our lives. Without warning, the man, who had posed as the husband, pulled out a handgun. Panic coursed through my veins as he brandished the weapon and ordered all of us to get down on the floor. The room filled with fear, and my heart pounded in my chest as I watched my family and our lives spiral into a nightmare. As if on cue, two more armed men burst into our home, their faces hidden by masks. They were ruthless, and one of the newcomers wasted no time in getting violent. He struck my 14-year-old son with the butt of his pistol, leaving my boy in pain and terror. The sight of my son being hurt was too much to bear. Anger and desperation surged within me, overwhelming my fear. I knew I had to do something to protect my family, even if it meant risking my life. Summoning every ounce of strength and determination, I wrenched myself free from the restraints that held me down. Ignoring the searing pain that lanced through my body, I launched myself at the man who had harmed my son, driven by a father's love and a husband's duty to protect his family. But in the chaos that ensued, I was met with a hail of bullets. Pain ripped through me as I was struck 3 times, and I collapsed to the ground, my world spinning into darkness. As I lay there, bleeding and broken, I could hear the cries and sobs of my family. My wife cradled me in her arms, her tears mixing with my own. My 2 sons were traumatized, their innocence forever shattered by the horrifying events they had witnessed. It was there, in my wife's loving embrace, that I took my last breath, surrounded by the people I cherished most in the world. The warmth of their love provided a small glimmer of solace as my life slipped away. 3 days after that tragic night, a routine traffic stop in California led to the arrest of 3 of the suspects: Kiyoshi Higashi, Joshua Reese, and Amanda Knight. They had fled the scene of their heinous crime, but justice had a way of catching up with them. A few days later, the 4th suspect, Claben Berniard, surrendered to the authorities. He faced a massive statewide manhunt, and the weight of his actions had finally caught up with him. The 4 of them were held accountable for their merciless crimes against my family. In the end, they were each sentenced to spend 79 to 123 years in prison. It was a small measure of justice for the immense loss my family had suffered, but it would never bring me back. My life was taken from me that night, and the pain of my absence haunted my loved ones every day. The nightmares of that fateful evening would forever linger in the hearts and minds of my wife and children, A reminder of the senseless brutality that could be unleashed by the darkness within some individuals. As I look back on my life and the horrifying Craigslist experience that ended it, I am reminded of the importance of cherishing our loved ones and holding them close. I hope that my story serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that danger can lurk in unexpected places, even in the guise of a simple online transaction. May my memory live on as a testament to the enduring power of love and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unspeakable horrors. I've always been the kind of person who tried to see the good in people, to trust that most folks out there were decent and well-intentioned. But my terrifying Craigslist experience shattered that trust and plunged me into a world of darkness and fear. It all started on an ordinary day in Minnesota. I had recently graduated from St. Olaf College and was trying to make ends meet by working part-time as a nanny, while pursuing my dream of a career in theater. I was 24 years old, full of hope and dreams, blissfully unaware of the horrors that awaited me. On the other side of the story was a young man named Michael John Anderson. He was 19 and had a fascination with playing paintball. But what set him apart from most people was a chilling curiosity about what it felt like to take another person's life. Little did I know that our paths would cross in the most horrifying way possible. Anderson, posing as a mother named Amy, posted a seemingly innocent Craigslist ad in 2007. She was looking for a babysitter for her child the following day. When I stumbled upon the ad, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to make some extra money. I had always been good with kids, and the thought of spending my day looking after a child sounded like a decent gig. We quickly exchanged messages, and arrangements were made for me to show up at the house at around 10 a.m. the next day. I had my reservations, a nagging feeling that something was off about this job, but I brushed it aside. It was just a gut feeling, nothing concrete to base my fears on. Little did I know that my instincts were trying to protect me. The fateful day arrived, and I made my way to the address Anderson had provided. The house was a rundown split level in Savage, Minnesota, nestled in a quiet neighborhood. It was the kind of place that seemed harmless on the surface, a far cry from the horror that awaited me within those walls. As I approached the front door, my heart raced with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. I knocked, and moments later, it swung open to reveal a young man who introduced himself as Michael John Anderson. He looked ordinary, unassuming, which only served to lull me into a false sense of security. Anderson led me up to the second floor, where he explained that his child was taking a nap in the bedroom. It all seemed normal at first, just a typical babysitting job. But then, as I stood there, an eerie sensation began to creep over me. It was a feeling of unease, a sense that something was terribly wrong. Nobody can say for certain what happened next, as there were no witnesses to the horrors that unfolded in that house. But at some point, my instincts kicked in, and I knew I had to get out of there. I made a desperate attempt to escape. But Anderson was prepared, and he was armed. In a horrifying moment, he raised a .357 Magnum and fired a shot. The bullet struck me in the back, and pain seared through my body as I crumpled to the floor. I was paralyzed by fear and agony, unable to comprehend the nightmare that had become my reality. Anderson wasted no time. He dragged my limp body down the stairs, his movements methodical and cold. It was as if he had done this before, as if he had planned every gruesome detail. In that moment, I was nothing more than a helpless pawn in his twisted game. He forced me into the trunk of his car, sealing my fate as he slammed the lid shut. Darkness closed in around me, and all I could do was tremble with fear and pain. My thoughts raced, my mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the horror that had befallen me. After what felt like an eternity, Anderson abandoned the car a few blocks away from his house, leaving me trapped in the suffocating darkness of the trunk. My body ached, and I could feel blood oozing from my wounds, staining my clothes and the trunk's interior. But Anderson's malevolence didn't end there. He was determined to erase any trace of his heinous crime, to destroy the evidence that could incriminate him. He crushed my cell phone mercilessly, shattering it into pieces. He then wrapped it in a bloody towel, a grotesque attempt to conceal his guilt. In a chilling twist of fate, he dropped the bundle into a public trash can, unknowingly leaving behind a damning clue. The towel bore his name, scrawled in black marker, a detail that would come back to haunt him. My ordeal seemed endless, and I felt like a prisoner in my own body, trapped and helpless. I yearned for escape, for someone to find me and bring an end to the nightmare that had become my life. But fate had other plans. In 2009, justice finally caught up with Michael John Anderson. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was a small victory, a sliver of solace in the face of unspeakable horror. My life would never be the same. The physical and emotional scars of that fateful day would linger, a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the most innocuous of encounters. I had survived, but at what cost? As I look back on that terrifying Craigslist experience, I'm reminded of the fragility of life and the capacity for evil that exists in the world. It serves as a chilling reminder that danger can come from the most unexpected sources, that trust can be shattered in an instant, and that sometimes survival is the only victory we can hope for. It was a sunny afternoon when I decided to list my old TV for sale on Craigslist. Money was tight, and I figured it was time to part with the trusty old box that had faithfully entertained me for years. The ad went up, and it didn't take long for potential buyers to start reaching out. One particular woman seemed interested. She messaged me, asking if she could come over to take a look at the television. I agreed, thinking it would be a simple and straightforward transaction. Little did I know that this decision would lead to one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. The agreed-upon time arrived, and I found myself eagerly waiting for her arrival. I had a feeling that this TV would find a new home quickly. As I peered out of my window, I saw her car pulling into my driveway. To my surprise, there were not just one or two, but about 4 or 5 other people in the car with her. They all piled out of the car and started walking towards my front door. My unease grew as I realized they all wanted to see the television. It wasn't what I had expected or agreed to. I had only expected the woman, but now I had a group of strangers on my doorstep. I mustered up the courage to address the situation. "I'm sorry," I told the woman, "but I can only allow you inside to see the TV." She seemed taken aback and exchanged glances with the others. "I really need at least one other person's opinion on this," she replied, her tone insistent. My instincts told me this was a bad idea, and I firmly declined. "I'm sorry, but it's just not possible." Her expression turned indignant, and she shot back, "You're not being very Christian about this." I was baffled by her response but stood my ground. "I'm sorry, but it's my house, and I get to decide who comes in." That seemed to be the final straw for them. One of the guys who had been with her walked over to the end of my driveway and urinated right there, as if to mark their displeasure. It was a bizarre and unsettling display of defiance. Eventually, they all piled back into the car, and I thought they had left. I locked my doors and tried to put the strange encounter out of my mind. Night had fallen by the time I got back inside my house, and I was feeling weary. I went about my bedtime routine, brushing my teeth and preparing for sleep. As I lay down in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I glanced out of my bedroom window, and my heart skipped a beat. A shadowy figure was lurking outside. My pulse quickened as I realized it was the same person who had urinated at the end of my driveway earlier. He was accompanied by the woman from before. Panic coursed through my veins as I watched them approach my front door. I knew I had to do something, so I quietly cracked open the window to get a better look. The two of them were definitely intoxicated this time, and they were fumbling around my front door. It didn't take long for them to break in. As soon as they were inside, I couldn't contain my fear any longer. I let out a scream and cried for help at the top of my lungs. But my house was on the far side of the city, and there were barely any other houses nearby. I was alone and vulnerable. They must have heard me screaming because they began to curse and threaten me. My heart pounded in my chest as I desperately reached for my phone to call 911. But before I could dial, one of them snatched it from my hand and hurled it against the wall. The impact shattered my lifeline into 1,000 pieces. I was trapped, cornered in my own home, with two strangers who clearly had ill intentions. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the dire situation I was in. My mind raced, and all I could think of was how to escape this nightmare. Then, in the distance, I heard the faint wail of police sirens. Someone must have heard the commotion and called 911. Panic gripped my assailants, and they scrambled to flee. I watched in terror as they rushed out of my house, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. The police arrived within what felt like an eternity, but in reality, it had only been a few minutes. I recounted the horrifying events to the officers, and they immediately set off in pursuit of the intruders. It was a stroke of luck that they were apprehended quickly. As the police left to deal with the criminals, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and terror. My house was in shambles, my TV destroyed, and my phone beyond repair. But I was alive, and that was what mattered most. The ordeal had been the most bizarre and terrifying experience of my life. I couldn't fathom why those strangers had targeted me, especially over a simple TV. It was a chilling reminder of the dangers that could lurk behind the seemingly innocuous interactions facilitated by the internet. Though I had lost material possessions that night, I had gained a newfound appreciation for my safety and well-being. It was a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life. The unsettling events of that night had left me on edge for weeks. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside my window sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that the man who had tried to sell me the questionable couch was somehow connected to the eerie visitation at my home. In an attempt to regain some sense of security, I had installed new locks on all my doors and windows. I even considered getting a security system but couldn't afford one at the time. My friends and family urged me to report the incident to the police, but I hesitated, fearing that it would lead to further unwanted attention from the stranger. As the days turned into weeks, life seemed to return to some semblance of normalcy. I threw myself into work and tried to put the frightening ordeal behind me. But the unease still lingered, like a shadow that refused to be dispelled. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, a notification on my phone jolted me from my routine. It was an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line simply read, couch. My heart pounded as I opened the email. The message inside was short and chilling. I hope you're enjoying your new couch. It looks lovely in your living room. A friend. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I read those words. It couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't be anyone other than the man who had tried to give me the couch in exchange for something I couldn't fathom. How did he know where I lived? How was he watching me? Panic washed over me, and I immediately called the police, providing them with all the information I had about the Craigslist seller, including his email address, the address of his house, and the unsettling proposition he had made. They assured me they would look into it and advised me to stay vigilant. The nights grew longer, filled with anxiety and dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that every move I made was being monitored. I considered staying with friends or family, but I didn't want to burden them with my fears. Then, one evening, as I was returning home from work, I noticed a car parked across the street from my apartment building. It was a nondescript sedan, but something about it felt off. It sat there, idling, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the car from a distance. Was it a coincidence, or was it connected to the stranger who had been haunting my life? I couldn't take any chances. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, reporting the suspicious vehicle and providing them with its description and license plate number. As I waited for the police to arrive, I couldn't tear my eyes away from the car. Minutes felt like hours as fear gnawed at my insides. Then, suddenly, the car's engine roared to life, and it sped away, disappearing into the night. When the police arrived, I recounted the entire ordeal, from the Craigslist ad to the eerie email and the suspicious car parked outside my apartment. They promised to increase patrols in the area and advised me to stay with someone I trusted until they could investigate further. That night, I stayed with my best friend, unable to shake the feeling that danger lurked just beyond the shadows. As the days turned into weeks, the police made efforts to trace the email and investigate the mysterious car, but their leads seemed to dissipate into thin air. With no concrete evidence to link the Craigslist seller to the harassment, I felt trapped in a never-ending nightmare. My nerves were frayed, and I couldn't escape the constant fear that he was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. As time passed, I made the difficult decision to relocate. I found a new apartment in a different part of town, hoping that a change of scenery would offer some semblance of peace. I never received another email, and the suspicious car never reappeared, but the trauma of that night still haunted me. Life moved on, but the scars of that Craigslist experience remained etched into my psyche. I became more cautious, more wary of the strangers I encountered, both online and in real life. I couldn't forget the feeling of vulnerability, the sense that danger could strike when least expected. In the end, I learned a harsh lesson about the dangers that could lurk in the seemingly ordinary corners of our lives. The internet, with all its conveniences, could also be a breeding ground for darkness. I had come face to face with a nightmare, and while I had escaped with my life, the memory of that night would forever serve as a chilling reminder that safety was never guaranteed, even within the confines of our own homes. For years ago, I was just a 19-year-old girl navigating the unpredictable waters of life. Little did I know that a simple decision to sell my Mazda Miata on Craigslist would plunge me into a chilling and surreal nightmare. The memories of that fateful ordeal still send shivers down my spine. It all began innocently enough. I loved my little red Miata, but circumstances had changed, and it was time to part ways with my beloved car. I turned to my friend for help, She had a knack for photography and volunteered to take some pictures of the car to create an enticing Craigslist ad. With the ad posted and my hopes high, I eagerly anticipated inquiries from potential buyers who shared my passion for the sporty little car. But the reality that unfolded was a far cry from my expectations. The calls started pouring in, and they were all from older men. It was as if they hadn't even bothered to read the description I had painstakingly crafted for the ad. The conversations were surreal, almost eerie. They'd ask me basic questions that were right there in the ad's description, as if they were deliberately trying to unsettle me. I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease, like something was terribly off-kilter. The discomfort escalated as the days passed. The callers grew more persistent, their inquiries increasingly invasive. I found myself answering questions that had nothing to do with the car. They seemed more interested in prying into my personal life, asking about where I lived and what my cross streets were. It was as if they were trying to piece together the puzzle of my existence. I tried to maintain a semblance of control over the situation, insisting on meeting potential buyers in public places. But one particularly unsettling caller, shattered my efforts. His voice oozed with a sinister undertone as he refused to engage in any discussion about the car itself. Instead, he persisted in demanding that we meet at my house. My attempts to steer the conversation back to the Miata were met with cold, unyielding resistance. I felt trapped, like a prey being stalked by a predator. My instincts screamed at me to stay away, to protect myself from this ominous stranger. But for reasons I can't fully explain, I reluctantly agreed to meet him at my house. It was a decision I would soon come to regret in the most horrifying way. As the appointed day drew near, I felt an unshakable sense of dread. It weighed heavy on my chest, a constant reminder of the perilous path I had chosen. I confided in my friend about the situation, and she urged me to cancel the meeting. But I was torn. A part of me wanted to confront this mysterious caller and put an end to the torment. The day arrived, marked by an overcast sky that cast a gloomy pallor over my home. I anxiously waited for the stranger to arrive, my nerves fraying with every passing minute. When his car finally pulled up to the curb, my heart raced like a runaway train. I greeted him at the door, my trembling hands betraying my facade of composure. He stepped out of his vehicle, his features obscured by the shadows. I strained to discern any details about him, but he remained shrouded in darkness. Our encounter was eerily quiet, the air thick with unspoken tension. He still refused to discuss the car, his sole focus fixated on me. He advanced closer, invading my personal space, and I recoiled, my instincts screaming for me to escape. It was then that I noticed the unsettling glint in his eyes, a predatory gleam that sent chills down my spine. He made no effort to conceal his malevolence any longer. His voice, laced with malice, dripped with sinister intent as he whispered, "You should have known better than to let a stranger into your home, sweet girl." Panic surged through my veins like wildfire. I had allowed a predator into my sanctuary, and I was trapped. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to call for help, but he lunged forward, snatching it from my trembling grasp. The realization of my vulnerability hit me like a sledgehammer. With every passing moment, the situation grew increasingly dire. He circled me like a vulture, his eyes never leaving my trembling form. It was clear that this was not about the car, this was about something much darker, much more sinister. My mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. I had to regain control of the situation, or I feared I would become another statistic, another cautionary tale of the dangers lurking online. But how could I outwit a predator who had already infiltrated my home? In a desperate bid to buy time, I began to talk, to distract him from whatever malevolent intentions he harbored. I asked about his interests, his hobbies, anything to divert his attention away from me. And, in that moment, I stumbled upon a glimmer of hope. He seemed taken aback by my questions, his demeanor momentarily shifting. It was as though he hadn't expected me to engage him in conversation. His guard slipped, if only for a moment, and I seized the opportunity. As he spoke about his mundane interests, I scanned the room for any potential weapons or means of escape. My eyes settled on a heavy glass vase sitting on a nearby table. It was my only chance, my only hope. With every ounce of strength and desperation, I lunged for the vase, smashing it against the wall. Shards of glass rained down around us, and I brandished a jagged piece as a makeshift weapon. It was a gamble, a desperate last stand. The predator's eyes widened in shock and fury as I held the makeshift weapon before me. He cursed and lunged at me, but fear had given me a strength I never knew I possessed. We grappled, a frenzied struggle for survival that played out in the dimly lit confines of my own home. The sounds of our struggle echoed through the house, a cacophony of violence and terror. I fought with every fiber of my being, knowing that failure was not an option. As we tumbled to the floor, I thrust the jagged glass toward him, and it found its mark. A guttural scream tore from his lips as blood spurted from the wound. He recoiled in agony, his malevolent grip on me loosening. It was my chance to escape, and I didn't waste a second. I scrambled to my feet, bloodied and bruised, and fled from my own home. Tears blurred my vision as I ran, not knowing where I was headed but desperate to put as much distance as possible between myself and the nightmare I had narrowly escaped. My phone, which he had taken, was lost to me, leaving me utterly alone and vulnerable. I stumbled upon a nearby convenience store, gasping for breath and covered in blood. The cashier, a kind and concerned soul, called the police and offered me shelter. It was there that I recounted the harrowing ordeal that had unfolded within the confines of my own home. The police arrived swiftly, their sirens piercing the night. They listened intently to my account of the chilling Craigslist encounter, their expressions growing graver by the minute. It was clear that they took my ordeal seriously, and their determination to catch the predator who had targeted me offered a glimmer of hope in the darkness. Days turned into weeks as the investigation unfolded. The police combed through the evidence, piecing together the chilling puzzle of my ordeal. They discovered a trail of twisted online activity, a sinister world where predators like the man who had terrorized me lurked in the shadows, preying on unsuspecting victims. As the evidence mounted, the police finally apprehended the man who had invaded my life. His capture brought a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that he could no longer harm me or anyone else, but dread at the realization of just how close I had come to becoming another tragic statistic. The trial that followed was a grueling experience, reliving the horrors of that fateful day in agonizing detail. I faced my attacker in the courtroom, a chilling encounter that sent shivers down my spine. His cold, unrepentant gaze seemed to bore into my very soul, a haunting reminder of the evil that had once lurked within my own home. In the end, justice prevailed. The man who had terrorized me was sentenced to a lifetime behind bars, a small measure of solace in the wake of the nightmare he had unleashed upon my life. I knew that I had been fortunate, that I had escaped a fate far worse than many others who had fallen victim to online predators. But the scars of that experience run deep, etched into my psyche as a reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind the anonymity of the internet. I've since taken every precaution to protect my online presence, to ensure that I am never again vulnerable to the predations of a stranger. And as I reflect on that chilling chapter of my life, I am left with a profound sense of gratitude for the kindness and compassion of those who helped me through the darkest days. It is a reminder that, even in the face of unspeakable horror, there is still goodness and light to be found in the world. So, I share my story as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that the digital realm can be a treacherous landscape, and that we must always be vigilant, always be cautious, in order to protect ourselves and those we hold dear. And I hope that my ordeal serves as a stark reminder that, even in the face of unimaginable terror, the human spirit has the capacity to endure, to overcome, and to emerge from the darkness stronger than ever before.